one thing, he's a worker, this guy. He's gonna work his back off to represent the people of the Sioux. He's gonna have a strong voice down at Queen's Park. He's gonna have everyone's back in here, like I'm gonna have their backs. And he's gonna be a great representative for the people of Sault Ste. Marie.
Welcome back to Closer Look on this Tuesday night with Michael Friscolanti, Editor-in-Chief here at Village Media. I'm Scott Sexsmith, closerlookpodcast.ca. You can reach out, by the way, with any questions you may have, closerlook@villagemedia.ca. Okay, we talked yesterday briefly about the Chris Scott MPP situation in Sault Ste. Marie. We continue to follow that story today.
It's a very serious story, and it's getting attention not only across the province but around the country.
Yeah.
Our team of journalists, both at Sault Today and the Trillium, have been covering it hard since the beginning and leading the way in a lot of angles of this story. But the follow continues and the questions continue right now. Basically, just to bring everybody up to speed, the MPP for Sault Ste. Marie, a rookie MPP, all of a sudden was kicked out of caucus.
Yes.
The news came in a one-line note to the Queen's Park Press Gallery on a Monday morning. Within an hour or so, Sault Today had reported that he was facing 2 criminal charges: assault with a weapon. He was arrested in Toronto over the weekend at the request of the Sault Police.
Right. And
it kind of spiraled from there. We learned, sadly, that the allegation is that it was a domestic violence incident, that he's accused of assaulting his wife. Mm-hmm. On the basic fact is, it's a sad story to hear the case like that, no matter who it involves. But there's political ramifications for this too, right? This is an MPP who was a very close advisor to Premier Ford before he became an MP, very close to the Premier, exactly. Was handpicked by the Premier to be the candidate here, and now is facing these very serious charges. And so I think there's as many unanswered questions as there are answered questions in this story. But we're gonna kind of catch up with what we know, what we don't know, with 2 of our journalists who've been covering this story from the beginning. All
right, Jessica Smith-Cross, our editor-in-chief at the Trillium, and Kenneth Armstrong, reporter at SiouxToday.com. Shocking news this week out of Queen's Park. Rookie MPP Chris Scott, who represents the riding of Sault Ste. Marie, was booted from Doug Ford's caucus Monday morning after news broke that he'd been arrested for an alleged domestic assault. Joining us tonight on the show to break down everything that we know at this point and what might come next are 2 of our journalists, Jessica Smith-Cross, editor-in-chief at the Trillium, and Kenneth Armstrong, a reporter at Sault Today. Welcome to you both. Thanks for joining us tonight on Closer Look.
Thanks, Scott. Always good to see you.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, Jess, I want to start with you if I can. Publicly, at least, the news began with a 1-sentence note from the Premier's office to the Queen's Park Press Gallery. What did that note say?
That Chris Scott was no longer a member of caucus. No explanation given, no follow-up.
Now, that doesn't happen very often, Jess, but when it does, it usually means something pretty serious.
Yeah, it's happened a few times before. This Premier hasn't hesitated to remove somebody from caucus when something has happened. So just to be clear on what being removed from caucus means is that the MPP is no longer a progressive conservative. They get to still sit as an independent, but they're no longer with the governing party.
All right. So, Jess, Premier Doug Ford was at a morning press conference right after that news broke. What did he say to reporters?
Basically, you'll have to ask him, right? The question was what happened and why. He said, you're going to have to ask him about that. Oh, and the Sault Police. And he had said he had just learned about it on the way to that event. So it looks like he was informed. The decision was made like that.
And that brings us right to the Sault Today newsroom, where by the time that news came out that he had been booted out of caucus, we'd been hearing rumors and whispers about what may have been going on. And then when the Premier said, check with Sault Police, that's where Ken Armstrong comes in. Ken's a journalist at Sault Today. Ken, what did you go from there?
Well, we're lucky enough in the Sault Today newsroom to be about a block away from the Sault Ste. Marie courthouse. So I, on a whim, taking a chance, went over to the courthouse to see if I could find any sign that there was a criminal complaint, which is one of the rumors that we had heard. And at about the same time, the court office confirmed to me what the charges were and that he was expected to be in bail court. And when I went to the courthouse, I was able to go in and I was just lucky enough to catch the last couple of minutes of his bail hearing.
And was it a video bail hearing, Ken?
So it was like a hybrid courtroom. He had been calling in, and from the discussions, it sounded like he was in custody. So he was calling in from Toronto. I'm not sure what facility he was in, or just in the police station, but it was clear that he was calling in from being in custody.
And what we now know for certain is that the Sioux Police had launched an investigation over the weekend after getting a complaint, asked the Toronto Police on Sunday to arrest Chris Scott.
Right.
Sounds like he spent the night in jail before his bail hearing on Monday. Ken, tell us the details of, obviously the publication ban covers what was said in the bail hearing, but the actual information, the charges sworn by the police are public document. What do they say?
Well, they say that Chris Van Scott, which is, I guess, his legal name. He uses Chris Scott as his political name. Was charged for an event on the 19th of this month, where he allegedly assaulted with a weapon his spouse, and he apparently used a high chair, like a baby's high chair, for that attack.
Yeah, that's what they're alleging the weapon is. Yes.
Ken, do we know what the conditions of his release are?
Yeah, I think they're pretty standard bail conditions. He's not allowed to have any weapons, as defined by the criminal code. He's not allowed to be within 100 meters of the alleged victim. He must reside. There's two addresses, one in Sault Ste. Marie and one in Toronto. He can only reside there if the complainant is not present. Those are the main conditions.
Jess, when news of the charges broke, what was the fallout at Queen's Park? Anyone calling on him to resign?
Yeah, after the first what is going on confusion, that was the first reaction. But after Ken here determined the basics of what was going on, and he was the first to do that, by the way, the NDP put out a call for Chris Scott to resign. He's not yet done so, actually.
Yeah, I want to get into some questions about the resignation,
Right.
Whether he could resign or should resign. We'll talk about that. But I just want to be clear about, he hasn't said much yet. He told the Sioux Star in a brief phone interview after he got out of jail that the charges are baseless, and that he has not responded to Ken's request for comment or anyone else from Sioux today. Ken, when was the last time you saw Chris Scott?
Coincidentally, earlier this month, I saw Chris Scott at the grand opening of the Women in Crisis Community Connection Center, which was partially funded by the provincial government as a place for women fleeing abuse to have sort of a more comfortable office environment to come in. One of the innovations there is they have an interview room for women to use to speak to police, so that they don't have to go to the police station in maybe a colder environment that might not be conducive to interviewing victims.
What are you hearing from people who may have been at that announcement or other people on the issue? The fact that now he's accused of intimate partner violence just days after opening this center for victims of intimate partner violence.
I haven't heard a lot. I mean, we have reached out to some people. I think a lot of people are waiting to see how this plays out before commenting, at least at the local level. We reached out to his opponent in the last provincial election, Lisa Vezo-Allen, who was representing the NDP. She offered a no comment. Number of other people we've reached out to have either offered a no comment or haven't got back to us yet.
Jess, can I come back to you? When you hear this kind of thing, what goes through your mind in terms of past precedents or other examples of where someone was suddenly booted from caucus or booted from cabinet?
So there've been a few. We've had all parties boot people from their caucuses for one reason or another. There's another example that might be familiar to a lot of our village listeners. Michael Mantha was ejected from the NDP caucus over it was a workplace harassment issue. There've been lots. Randy Hillier was a high-profile example. His actions over COVID got him ejected from the PC caucus. Actually, the ejected more MPPs than I could probably name on this podcast if we want to keep it moving. It means they sit in the legislature still, and unless there is further action taken, they get to vote as an independent and they can still participate.
Mm-hmm. I just want to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Scott.
I'm just curious, Jess. Is there a prerequisite for the number of days that an MPP has to be present in the legislature? In other words, could Chris Scott stay wherever he wanted to at his Toronto residence or elsewhere and still be a recognized sitting MPP, not being in the legislature physically?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, Scott. He does not have to show up to keep his seat. There's no requirement to do so. And over the years, there have been the odd time where we noticed that somebody hasn't been around for a while. It's a bit of a digression, but I remember talking to an elderly MPP for the Liberals when they were in government who had really just not been coming in for, I think, over a year, potentially it was 2. And he said that he had wanted to resign because to spend more time with his family, and the government asked him to just hang on for a while and keep the seat. So it does happen. It's rare, but it is quite possible that he could remain an MPP without resigning, but also not show up at Queen's Park. And there's some precedent that MPPs who've come under a lot of fire tend to not come in, at least for a while, because they don't want to face media, the press, the whole circus, you know?
That's interesting. And just to be clear, we haven't said this yet. These are allegations filed by the police. They have not been tested in court. He's presumed innocent until proven guilty. But it does raise a lot of questions about what would happen. So the rules are that just because you're charged with a crime doesn't mean you have to leave, that you can keep this position. Is there a scenario, Jess, I'll stick with you, where if he was convicted of this crime, that he would have to leave?
Yeah. So if he is convicted and sentenced to and it's an indictable offense, which this would be, and it's over 2 years or more, then the seat is vacated. The issue there is that it takes a long time to get a charge through the criminal process and to get that sentence. And none of that is obviously a guarantee, even if he is guilty of doing what he's alleged to have done.
Yes. And you've done some research, too, that there is one instance in the legislature where they voted to expel someone and force them out. What was that scenario?
Yeah, I wasn't sure about this, so I did some deep research here. One time before, an MPP has been expelled from their seat, so fully kicked out. That was in 1884. So there's not a lot known. It was a guy who had been in cabinet. But it looks like it could have been a medical condition, but the reason given was actually like incurable mental condition.
Oh, wow.
So it is possible. There's no precedent for it. There's very little precedent for it. The only precedent is a long time ago, and there's not obviously going to be an appetite to do that. This government, like the legislature under the Ford government, has censured an MPP before. So if they want to send a signal about this for whatever reason, it would probably be the more likely step is that they pass a motion to remove his ability to vote on things and participate, speak on the House and stuff like that would probably come first before any effort to actually remove him. But if he's censured and doesn't lose his seat, the Sioux wouldn't get a new MPP in a by-election.
Yes.
Okay, and that leads to my next question, and I'm asking only because I don't know the answer. So let's assume that he does resign. What does that process look like, Jess? What's the timeline, and how long possibly could residents of the Sioux go without having an active sitting MPP?
Right, yeah, if he does resign, the government could decide to call a by-election very quickly. They could also wait, I think it's 6 months. This is not one of the things I fact-checked before getting on the podcast, unfortunately, but sometimes it is a long time before the the by-election is called, and that's the prerogative of the premier.
Well, Ken, can I ask you, I just want to remind our listeners, for those who don't know this riding, there was a little bit of controversy when Chris announced his intention to run, right? He was someone that most people, he was not a familiar face. He worked in the former MPP's office, Ross Romano, back in sort of 2016, 2017. But for the previous 2 years before that, he'd been a senior staffer in Premier Ford's office. Can you take us back? What was the feeling among the community when he arrived, and the thought of I guess there was really a debate between, do we vote for the candidate who's probably going to be with the governing party, or do we go with someone like Lisa Vezo-Allen, who was a very well-known local candidate running for the NDP? What do you remember from that time, Ken?
Well, yeah, I mean, aside from the fact that most people didn't know him, he also wasn't doing any media interviews. Mm-hmm. So we didn't really have a chance until the very end of the campaign, when I think suddenly they thought it was a good idea to do some. That unless you had him knock on your door during the election campaign, you wouldn't know him from anybody else. So, you know, it obviously it ended up working out for him. He did win. Was it 118 votes? Is that?
Yeah.
It was something. It was something like that. It was a very, very close margin of victory. And, you know, obviously the people of Sault Ste. Marie did vote him in, but he did not win by a landslide by any means.
Mm-hmm. And if I recall, there was a lot of discussion surrounding, you know, him being a parachuted candidate into this riding. And you sat down with him and asked him that very question. We should roll that clip for the audience so they can see how he responded.
The reason I think it's lazy and you know, doesn't really stick with our supporters and with the people that we're talking to is because it's a term used, I think, for people that aren't actually in their area. You know what I mean? Like it's a term for somebody that doesn't understand the issues and isn't present in the community, and that's not me, right? I've got 3 kids under 4. My oldest, well, actually just turned 4. She's going to school in the fall, right? We're registering her. Like, she's going to school in Sault Ste. Marie. You know what I mean? Like, we bought a house here. Like, it's like we're not.
You answered my next question. So.
Yeah. So like,
we just need your address if you could tell us.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the things that we, you know, have a bit of a issue with sometimes because the kids aren't on the ballot, so we don't really want to share a personal address for.
No, for sure. I'm not asking for your personal address.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, to my earlier point, you know. This is home for us.
As Ken mentioned, he didn't give a lot of interviews. He didn't give any interviews at all right till the very. I believe he agreed to come on in the studio here the day before the election and spoke about that. But it was a big issue for a lot of people because they didn't know who he was, and that kind of leads to what happens now. Because now, and I want to ask you both this. I'll start with Ken. We have an independent MPP now in this riding. Where there's a lot of big issues at play here, like in all parts of Ontario. He campaigned on the idea that he was going to be in Doug Ford's inner circle, that he's going to be close to the government and be able to have access. What does that mean for the community now, Ken, that he's suddenly an independent with no access at all to the party?
Well, like I was mentioning before about the funding announcement that he did earlier with Women in Crisis, that followed another Women in Crisis transitional housing announcement he did earlier in the summer. There's a lot of issues that are affecting Sault Ste. Marie. Femicide and intimate partner violence are definitely part of it. We obviously had a mass murder in October of 2023 and a number of other incidents before that and since. So that's definitely one issue that Sault Ste. Marie would like to get. You know, we've been calling for in October of 2023, Sault Ste. Marie City Council declared intimate partner violence an epidemic and has been asking the province to follow suit. And that's something that has not happened. And, you know, I think that's obviously a big issue. There are dozens of issues, homelessness and the opioid crisis and others among them, that we definitely need representation at Queen's Park to be able to bring Sault Ste. Marie's voice to Queen's Park. And it's going to be more difficult with an independent than it would otherwise.
Jess, what does it mean practically for Chris? He obviously, but no staff all of a sudden now?
Yeah. He would still get his salary, but he would lose all the things that you get with being part of the government caucus. So the communication support matters. If you're going to put out a statement to the media saying you may decide to keep your seat or resign, you're on your own for that. You still have a constituency office, though.
I don't want to ask you both whether he should resign or not. That's not really our discussion. But what's going through his mind when he weighs whether he's going to keep going here, Jess? What are some of the things that he's got to take into consideration, considering all that's happened in the last 48 hours?
I mean, they're paid about $157,000 a year, so that's going to weigh in with anybody. There's your reputation at stake because you're a public figure. We only know from his very, very brief statement to the Sioux Star that he's at least saying the charges are baseless, but he hasn't explained that yet. So if he does feel like the best thing for his name and his future is to stick and fight, that's a choice. He might also think on the alternative that resigning would be the right thing, to resign to fight the charges, and then if he wants to enter politics, go back after having been acquitted or what might happen. So it's really hard to say, but money, public reputation, those things matter to everybody.
Absolutely. Ken, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, obviously he has a very private domestic situation that he's got to figure out. He's got criminal charges that are very, very serious that he has to get figured out. So I don't know how much time that's going to leave him to fight for Sault Ste. Marie at Queen's Park. But obviously he's going to have a lot of soul searching to do in the next little while to figure out how he's going to move forward with all of these issues.
Ken, what's the next step in the criminal case? I don't know if you may not have it right in front of you, but there's obviously another court date coming up.
Yeah, it's coming up next month. I follow a lot of sort of these situations in court. He could be waiting a year, 2 years for a trial. It could take quite a long time to get this resolved if he doesn't plead out or if the charges aren't dropped for some reason. We could be waiting 2 years or more to see how this plays out for a verdict.
All right, before we let the two of you go, final comments. Ken, to you first. Anything we didn't cover or you want to mention before we let you go?
No, I mean it's obviously still a developing situation. We know very little. We haven't heard directly from Mr. Scott. There's going to be a lot more stories to come, I'm sure, in the next little while.
All right, Jess, last word to you.
It's just sad, right? We're talking about this because this guy's an MPP, but these sort of situations happen to families all across the province, and it's just incredibly sad for the family. For whatever happened there, it's not good, and that's what I'm left thinking about.
All right, there's reporter Kenneth Armstrong from SiouxToday.com and our editor-in-chief at The Trillium, Jessica Smith-Cross. Thanks to both of you for the discussion tonight.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Frisco.
Well, one thing is for sure, this story is far from over.
For sure. And I want to be clear again that these allegations that have been filed in court, they're 2 criminal charges.
Yes.
They have not been proven. They have not been tested in court. So Chris Scott is presumed innocent until proven guilty. And we have reached out to Chris. Our news organization reached out to Chris multiple different ways. He has not responded yet to us. We, of course, would invite him on the podcast if that was ever something we would want to do. We will continue to report this story and all sides of the story. So
yes.
What you said is accurate. What we know right now is what's been reported, but there's other things that have not been reported yet, and we'll continue to report on that. But it is a sad story, and when you think from a strictly local level, it's pretty bad for the community of Sault Ste. Marie, right?
It sure is.
It was a razor-thin margin this election when he beat Lisa Vezo-Allen of the NDP, who's a very well-known city councillor,
right.
has done a lot of great community work in the Sioux, and she was seen as the everyone knows you, local candidate, and he was seen as the parachute candidate, but aligned with Doug Ford. So everyone knew Ford was going to win. The polls showed that. And people obviously chose, they wanted to have a government MPP.
But only by 118
votes, right? But clearly the community decided by that razor-thin margin that they wanted to have Doug Ford's guy as their MPP as opposed to the opposition MPP. And so that's where we stand now. And now all that is up in the air because he's now as far away from the core of the party right now, being an independent. And if he doesn't resign, we kind of have an MPP that's sort of in limbo, really. He has no, I don't even know what the rules are for how often he can even ask a question in the legislature because he's not affiliated with any party. So I'm sorry I don't know those details off the top of my head, but it won't be a lot.
No,
I'm sure he doesn't get a ton of time asking questions, and he won't have the same, front door to the premier to talk about issues that are. And look, do I know everything about how politics works? No, but for sure, some of the announcements we've seen in this community are because Chris Scott has that direct laneway to the premier.
No question.
That's just how politics works.
Yeah.
So
and now that's gone away.
Yeah, a lot of questions that are raised there, and but as Ken so eloquently put it, there's also this other aspect of which is a very terrible family situation. They're going to have to deal with both their family situation and the criminal charges. So all we can say is we'll keep people up to date as we hear and as we learn more about this case.
Absolutely. Should he resign or shouldn't he? Let us know. Closer look at villagemedia.ca. We'd love to hear from you on this topic or any other. All right, that's it for us this evening. We're back tomorrow night. For Michael Friscolanti, our editor-in-chief here at Village Media, I'm Scott Sexsmith. Enjoy your night, what's left of it. We'll see you tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock, right here on Closer Look.
Frisco and Scott's Wardrobe provided in part by Moores, Sault Ste. Marie.